It's September 22nd, 2021, and we're talking to Dignitas Academy head coach Invert about the World Championships group draw, his team's Proving Grounds run, and their year in recap. This is the True Sight Podcast. Welcome to the True Sight Podcast by Oracle's Elixir, your source for in-depth analytical coverage of professional League of Legends and the rest of the esports world. I'm Tim Magic Sevenhusen, and today, Coach Invert from Dignitas Academy is returning to the show. We're going to do a retro on the team's Proving Grounds run and their overall competitive year. We're going to look ahead a little bit to 2022, and of course, maybe we're going to talk a little Worlds along the way because it is late September, and that is what is at the foremost of everyone's minds, as much as I wish they'd be thinking more about Proving Grounds like I have been.
It's World season. Group draw just happened. Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited for it. It just means more league to watch, on top of Proving Grounds, so can't complain about that, honestly.
Yeah, and then the reason you guys aren't still playing is because you had to make that transition, right? So you figured, okay, guys, I need an extra week for World type.
I need to prep for these wildcard teams. I haven't watched them very much, so can we just give me the extra week to do that? Thanks, guys, but much appreciated. Yeah, no, that's exactly how the conversation went.
Well, why don't we kick things off with talking a little Worlds, just because it is, I think, a good thing to put up front. And since the group draw was today, it was this morning, 5 a.m. Pacific. I got up for it as a way to practice. I'm going to be getting up every day early to watch all the games in Europe throughout Worlds. So I figured I'll do a run on that today. Tweet a little bit about it, have a little fun. So, but I understand you did not. You watched it all afterwards.
Yes, yeah. The Yankos facial expressions were a treat. I'll say that. Every year you always get one player's facial expressions when they've realized they've, saved their region in the group stage or doomed their region in the group stage. So this year it was Yankos. In years past it's been players like Rookie, the famous Jizuke picture of him holding the RNG upside down. The Rogue draw, to start off with that, you have to feel for them, right? I think that's the second year in a row they get Damwon, and as well as that, one of the Chinese powerhouses. And given how that group shakes out, depending on the play-ins, I'm pretty sure the only team, assuming all 4 top seeds from play-ins go to the group stage, the only team that can go in there is C9, right? You have to feel for Rogue, and I suppose if that's their only possible group, you must have to feel for C9 as well, because you're essentially playing with 2 tournament favorites right off the jump.
Yeah, I mean, I did see, I think it was Perks tweeted out that, the secret game plan will be to go third in their group in play-ins so that they cross over and play someone like Hanwha or LNG and knock them out in play-ins,
out one of the major
which
regions.
Gives them an opportunity, if that happens, to be 50-50 drawn into Group C, depending on what other stuff goes on. So, maybe, I don't know, we'll see what happens.
A little finessing, or you just take the tournament favorites out right off the bat, There
you go.
Rogue number 2, C9 number 1 in that group. Why not, right?
Yeah, I'm sure Rogue would prefer to have C9 come into their group and give the best possible chance to steal a couple games off of Damwon or FBX and make it a little bit easier, because the stronger the group is overall, the more chance there is that it's not free wins for the teams that as long as you take care of business against C9 in that case. Maybe C9 pulls a game out of Damwon and off you go. But you never know with that one. So Group A definitely, I think, will be the hardest group to get out of. Group B is the 100 Thieves group, right? Again, with T1 and EDG.
Yeah, to me that's like the 100 Thieves monkey paw curling kind of group where you win LCS, but at what cost? I think that group is actually pretty difficult for 100 Thieves, if only because of the playstyles of the teams that they're surrounded by. I think EDG and T1, they're not really top-centric teams either, and your powerhouse bot lane is going up against the best AD carry in the world, in my opinion, in Viper. So it's a kind of like clash of similar styles in Group B, of which I think 100 Thieves is at the moment, depending on how the meta shakes out, they look to be the worst team at that style. I also did a huge study on 100 Thieves because I had heard from, I believe it was Hotline League, their assistant coach had mentioned that they had borrowed a lot of concepts in their LCS finals weekend run from Mad Lions. A lot of people talk about why Mad Lions mid game is so good, they talk about how it is so good, but they don't necessarily talk about why. So, I kind of jumped into looking at how 100 Thieves adapted some of those mid game traits from Mad Lions. I didn't really see a huge ton of crossover of what Mad does compared to what 100 Thieves does. I saw some similar set plays, some similar movement, but it wasn't executed as cleanly by any means as what I normally see from Mad. I actually want to do a video now that we're out of Proving Grounds, and I can leak all the findings. I want to do a video explaining why everyone praises Mad's mid game and how 100 Thieves tried to replicate it. So that's my concern with 100 Thieves in that group. I think they would have preferred to be in the group that TL is in, and we could talk about that later, just because of the stylistic differences.
Well, I figure, in the situation 100 Thieves are in, they're probably looking at, okay, our more reasonable target is to get out second, and T1 is the team that we think we can get out against, right? Like T1, and I haven't watched a ton of them. I've watched a little bit, but it seems like they definitely have some consistency issues. They don't have, like, when I'm looking at like theoretical roster building, I always think about like weak points more than I think about superstars. And to me, T1 seem like they get a little weakness in top jungle, that it doesn't quite, I don't know, it doesn't quite stand up. So maybe there is an opportunity for 100 Thieves to get past them.
I actually have kind of the opposite opinion as you, looking at the EDG's LPL playoff run. They lost a series, if I recall correctly, to WE, and that was not a clean or that was a pretty messy series. I think LPL teams historically in the group stage have been a little worse at best of one, matches. You think back on FPX in their group in 2019 versus Splice, or different RNG situations where they came out second or they failed to make it out. I think LPL teams are actually the teams that you can target in a much easier capacity in best of ones, because I think they're a little less consistent. The plays they go for, there's higher risk, higher reward, and so in a best of one setting, when you do go for those plays, if the coin lands the wrong way, the aggression hits the wrong way, that gives world's caliber teams chances to snowball on you pretty effectively, right? I think of Splice versus FPX as kind of the big indicator of that, or the big example of that. So I think that group, if anything, is looking like T1 can stand tall through like the experience of Faker. I think they actually cleaned up their play quite a bit during the LCK playoffs. Like, I think they actually looked very strong, and I think EDG also looks strong, but that there's more exploitable weaknesses that you saw in the WE series that you can target heading into patch 11-19 and the group stage.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we'll have to see how it plays out, I guess. Group C is I didn't write down Group C.
That was the PCS group.
Right.
So it's Fnatic. Yeah, PSG. Goodness, why is it escaping me?
It's got to be JayJ.
L
No, JayJ
no,
is in Group D.
it's
The other
LPL.
LPL team. Oh boy.
RNG.
There we go.
Sorry. Yeah.
Too many
So
G's.
yeah. Again,
That
I
could go a lot of ways.
cannot speak to PSG Talon. I don't think I have enough personal information on them. But Fnatic RNG is just so spicy. I'm gonna love watching that series because or that set of best of ones, just because I think Xiaohu could be the best top laner in this tournament, and I think Adam is gonna be kind of either the whipping boy of this tournament, or uh, depending on how top meta plays out. He had a pretty small champ pool in LEC. Well, it was some niche picks. We'll see if those niche picks carry him through that head-to-head matchup with Xiaohu, or if RNG plays to topside as successfully as they did in the LPL. I think they're the team that is best at transitioning a topside lead to affecting the rest of the map when Xiaohu is on picks like Jace. So, moving forward, it's kind of a tale of, can Adam survive that, and can Upset Hilly disrupt what is kind of technically a bot lane that RNG doesn't play towards, which historically is very funny to say. That RNG was always that team that played towards bot, but if you watch their LPL games this year, you'll notice it's actually quite the opposite this time around. So I think that is a very, very interesting set of best of ones to be watching. And again, I'm only speaking about that set because I don't know enough about PSG Talon, unfortunately.
Right, but I think even if PSG really impressed in your body review, you'd have to look at the the number one seeded teams and say they're closer to the 100 Thieves level more likely than they are to the EDG.
Of course, of the seed one teams, you want PSG. Of all of them, you want them over Damwon, EDG, Mad, 100%. So, but that doesn't mean they're weak by any means.
No.
I can't accurately gauge their power level, or I could VOD review them and be like, yeah, they're on the same level as these teams. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. Well, in Fnatic are a team that they play in such a kind of wild way that anything can happen, really. They could get destroyed, but they could also roll over you, right? And I mean, they've been among the teams tweeting about interesting scrim results, I think so.
Yeah, I wonder who's memeing and who's not. You gotta comb through the clutter on that one.
And then Group D, so Team Liquid landed with Mad Lions, JayJ, and then you assume, if LNG makes it out of play-ins, this is the only group they can land in, because there are LPL teams in all three other groups. So that seems like a pretty, depending how good LNG is, that's a pretty tough group. But again, not impossible for TL to get out of.
Yeah, I like this group for TL. I would have liked it more for 100 Thieves, honestly. I think JayJ is the Korean team that you would have wanted to face the most. I think,
aside from Hanwha, but they're not part of this draw.
Exactly, and I think that's the Korean team you wanted out of this draw, and I think LNG is the Chinese team you want in the group stage if they make it out as well. I think LNG has really great qualities in. I am a huge fan of their top laner. I think he is actually very, very good. Of course, Tarzan is ramping up into his form from his days in Griffin, which I think is really exciting because that's best jungler in the world form. And I think Icon, Light, and Iwandi are very good role players, I guess. I don't feel very strongly about Light. I think his laning is pretty poor from what I've seen, and Icon has very large champion pool, but if he pops off, it's like very surprising. Like it's not something that's expected. So I think their whole bot side are like pretty good role players. I think Light is like a serviceable carry, but in the LPL, he looks like that where there's a lot of pretty reasonable AD carries. So maybe it's different in a world setting. Icon, I think, again, the champ pool Ocean is exciting, but I didn't find him particularly memorable either. And I think Iwandi worked really well with Tarzan, so looking forward to like the jungle support out of LNG and specifically how it affects top lane, because I think the top laner is very, very good. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have on LNG
I think
from my experience.
If you look for a group where like a relative favorite is most likely to get knocked out, I think Group D would be that, right? Where you say that Mad and JayJ should be on paper the favorites in this group, but the likelihood for TL or LNG to make it through over one of those, I think, is higher than. I mean, depending how you want to view Group C in terms of favorites, but
I actually wonder how much stock people put in Gen.G. I know a lot of people, a lot of tier lists have them varied. Like some, I recall, like Core JayJ, who has a little bit of Gen.G bias, was very high on Gen.G, and I recall other people being very low on Gen.G just because their style of play is very slow. It's not super aggressive. You're relying on Ruler and to carry and BDD to carry. So I just wonder. They carry later stages of the game, like past 30-35 minutes. I think if I recall correctly, their average game time is actually pretty low compared to what people expect. I wonder how much of that is due to playing like pretty bad LCK teams, because I think the level of LCK overall was fairly low this year, or the split
relatively
rather.
speaking,
relatively speaking, versus what you expect of their play style, which is just let Ruler scale up, let BDD scale up on picks like Azir, Ezreal, etc. So if they bring that to Worlds, and again, this is totally meta dependent, because based on what has been shown on patch 11.18 and 11.19, I don't think we're going to get a very slow Worlds when you have champs like Zed, Kiana, Talon, running all over the place in the jungle. I'm not seeing a slow Worlds, but if the beta somehow evolves to that slower pace, I think teams like Mad are actually could suffer from that a little bit based on how they move around the map. And I think teams like TL and Gen.G appreciate that a little more.
It's always one of those things, right? Like the meta has a pretty big say in how which teams end up being comfortable and which teams are able to adapt to it. So that'll be a big storyline for sure. Cloud9, I think it being a team that obviously is going to be the first North American team we get to see competing in the play-in stage. It's pretty easy to pretty comfortable to say, oh, they're going to make it out, and they got a good draw. They landed in a group where they don't have to face either Hanwha or LNG. As long as they finish top 2 in their group, they won't have to play those guys unless something really strange happens with those. But the highly expected results are Cloud9 either get first in their group and move on, get second and have to play a minor region team.
Yeah, and I wonder how much their MSI affects their thinking on the play-in groups. Like a lot of people think they're shoo-ins and whatnot, but this is a team that lost to the LCO representative at MSI, right? And to be honest, in my opinion, looking at the draft, it was very unplayable draft-wise. I think the draft was very difficult in that game, but I think that is a very humbling experience that could lead them to take these play-ins. I mean, they're going to take them incredibly seriously anyways. It's Worlds, but lead them to not take their foot off the pedal at all and off the gas pedal, and make sure that they are going to go through first, or they are going to hatch their master plan to not be in Group A. Either way, I think the experience with the LCO match against Pentanet at MSI could be very telling in terms of how they approach this international tournament, and specifically the play-in stage.
Yeah, because you definitely can't, you can't go in with too much confidence and take it too lightly, because it is best of ones. It is a scenario where you've had some issues and been caught off guard before. It's a scenario where that could happen to I don't know, LNG could drop to third, and you might have to, and if you finish second, you might have to play them. Like you better be taking it as seriously as possible, because it's only last year that Mad Lions didn't make it out of play-ins. And that could happen to you as well. That said, I think Cloud9 are in a very strong position in the draw. So
it's no longer a play-ins are no longer a formality, is kind of what the last year's Worlds and MSI kind of taught us. It doesn't seem like they're this thing that just happens just to make sure that all the major regions get in. Like it's definitely more competitive now than it ever has been, which in my opinion is really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, enough Worlds talk. Nobody cares about any of that anyway, so we can just move on to what really matters.
Give me
Proving Grounds.
Let's talk about the best competition.
Peak NA LOL. For sure. So you guys were in Proving Grounds. We were heading into the final week of the tournament. Would be this week. You guys dropped out last week in the 5th, 6th spot, so just barely missed out on that top 4. But you did get to play best of 5s. So I'd say that's a pretty good threshold to hit.
We played 4 overall, 4 best of 5s with this roster.
Relative to kind of your expectations, that now that you're a little removed from it, and you can, maybe take a little bit more of a sober step back and not just, go in with as much hope and optimism as possible. But, relative to those expectations you would have had going in, how do you feel about the finish that your team put together?
I would say 2 things. My expectations before UGP, which was the kind of last chance qualifier tournament of Proving Grounds, compared to after UGP, were actually very different. My expectations on us before UGP was that we do our best and people show their best selves, and whatever happens. We did not have a good academy split by any means. That say what you will about our level of gameplay, there was just so much chaos happening around our roster and around all that it was difficult to settle into a rhythm and be able to develop a play style and identity as a team. And so we're switching mid jungle pretty consistently throughout academy, and it threw us off a little bit every time. So and then bringing Will in, we got to bring Will into Los Angeles as well, and have him in person, I think, was the catalyst to a lot of great results, because everyone gets to know each other a little better. We get to work on the mental aspect of things very closely in person, which I think is underrated. And I think going into UGP, winning UGP, especially in the fashion that we did, where it was more of a show of our resilience than our dominance, because we had to reverse sweep one of the series and come back in the final series as well. That showed me that if we were to make the best of 5s in Proving Grounds, that we could have a similar showing due to that resilience. I thought actually winning UGP made our bracket, like our seeding, worse than the other teams, actually.
Well, how might it have looked different?
We had to play 6 seed and then 3 seed, whereas the other teams like they either got to play amateur teams or they got to uh, play, like, for example,
Yeah.
like TSM played 100 in round
So,
one, I
because if you
believe,
had dropped, if you'd finished a little higher, you would have played teams obviously a little further down and gotten into the amateur teams, which you couldn't have done, right? But like,
yeah,
if you had played against the 5 seed or the 4 seed, you might have been able to run into a team with some subs or something like that, right?
exactly. So we didn't really get that chance, but I didn't mind our bracket at the end of the day. I think our series against TLA, which that's the number 1 seed, was incredibly competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Strategically, I think we dropped the ball game 3, and game 1 we didn't play to our comp strengths. But game 2, it was like very clear that when we're on, we can, beat these teams and be kind of this best team in Proving Grounds. I think there are a lot of games within Proving Grounds and within UGP that show that kind of flair where, some of these guys, honestly, like, at those peaks are playing at that LCS level as North American talent, which excites me a lot. A little bit of insider information, but like over the past month and a half, which was UGP to Proving Grounds, we lost like 3 scrim sets over 1.5 months. Like,
Wow.
straight up, we're just it got to the point, and I think versus amateur teams, we lost 3 games total. Versus every amateur team we played, and we played quite a few amateur teams because our scrim schedule was very different as Will was attending high school. So that's why the 5th, 6th placing stings a little more looking back on it, is because we found our stride. We were dominating in practice, and on stage we showed a lot of resilience. And on the day versus TL, it was super competitive. And then on the day versus Immortals, you know, like every good plan. What's the saying? It's like every good plan crumbles under a punch to the face, or something like that.
Yeah.
But the TL series, that's like the first series we genuinely lost in a month and a half, and picking ourselves back up after that in 2 days, that's a pretty difficult undertaking. So we did our best to do that. We tried to play what works and what we think is strong. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, who watch that series, like, Keith got Aphelios every time and Viper got Camille every time, but we were confident in the matchups we were playing into those champs. Varus is historically very strong into Aphelios, and on the day we just didn't execute on the matchups we thought were strong correctly, and we just have to live with that. And I think relative to everyone's expectations at the end of the Academy season, though, I will say that our Proving Grounds run was a massive, massive success, because coming out of the end of Academy, no one expected anything out of us. And now people are talking about some of our players as some of the best prospects North America has to offer, which I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, I would love to talk about some of those players individually a bit more, but so the 2 teams that you guys did lose your series to and get knocked out by in the end, Team Liquid and Immortals, both of whom are still in the top 4 now. Which of them, you'd assume that Team Liquid was kind of the harder team to play against. They're the Academy playoffs champions, and they're still in the upper bracket and all that kind of stuff. Does that hold up in your experience? Was it harder to play and to plan against Team Liquid than it was against Immortals, or is Immortals a pretty stiff challenge in their own right?
100%. I think the difference in playing with the 2 teams or against the 2 teams is that in Team Liquid's case, at least with the roster they're running then, with Jenkins and Armau, is that everyone in that team is a pretty good laner. Like, their laning strength is actually very strong. Sorry, that was a terrible sentence, but they're strong laners, right? Like I think Harry and Jenkins for the Proving Grounds level, and you can see it in their amateur series. They just blow the other solo laners out of the water, and I think their team identity is the most cohesive out of all, especially out of I would say all the remaining Proving Grounds teams except for Golden Guardians, which we can get to as well, where I think they just have very strong laners and their jungler is incredibly selfless, and they'll play for the 5v5 team fight. Like they're not going to play to split you up like we do, because that was our style. Is we played really skirmish heavy. We played with TF, Galio, Rise, like playing with the globals that Soligo can push and move with, and skirmish with will, right? Or skirmish for specific objectives, right? And like create quick numbers advantages and just pull the trigger, right? But TL plays super different. They make sure that everyone is together, 5-man for a neutral objective before they make any sort of play. Or everyone's together 5-man for executing the specific push, right? Or defending the specific push. So I think in that regard, like TL was the most cohesive team. We played all Proving Grounds in matches and in practice. And then I think Immortals, I mentioned the laning of TL was pretty solid. I found Immortals bot lane to be incredibly lacking in practice and in their official matches. And I found I think Onda, I think his pathing was like very smart some games and then very silly other games. So it was kind of that combination of like, we didn't find their laning to be as strong as to why, and the fact that they were like flipping a little more in jungle pathing as to why I found TL a much more difficult team to play against and prepare against.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's kind of how I would characterize those teams. And you look at like Jenkins having really high kill participation, for example, compared to a lot of the other top laners, does kind of fall into that kind of grouping play style where they do a lot of that. They get a lot of team fighting approaches out of Harry as opposed to side lane kind of champions. Definitely is kind of their profile. And on Immortals, they're very much a top side team, solo lane team especially. That is what you're going to get out of them. And you can see that they get carried by like Keith will clean up team fights when you give him the opportunity for it, but he's not really the one that you kind of set up your game plan around.
They're not playing. They're not playing towards him. Joey will spend a lot more time in top river than in bot lane. So, that's how they've decided to play, and it fits their team pretty well. So, hats off to them, and they were definitely the better team on the day. I thought we weren't fully performing during our best of 5. So
cool. Well, let's talk about your roster. Let's get into these individuals and who they are, what makes them tick, and dissect them a little bit. And the first player and you've already mentioned him, I think most specifically by name is Will, because he has such an interesting story this split, coming in as a response to the Acadian promotion, having to play remotely for some of the split with going the high school year starting, and the fact that he's still only 16. He hasn't turned 17 yet still, right?
Yeah.
I don't know the actual birth date.
So. Not yet. November.
Okay. Somebody's got to put November. These players' birth dates into Leaguepedia so that we can actually know these things. So I mean, tell me about him. Like, let's even go back to kind of where did he come from? What was it? What led to him being the replacement player you brought in when maybe you would have looked at a mid-split roster change? It might be the safer thing to bring in someone with some experience. And how did you kind of pluck this 16-year-old out of seemingly nowhere and run with him?
Sure. So in order to answer this question, we have to go back a year ago, to about October 2020. Dignitas off season, I had been planning along with management to create Dignitas Mirage, which is our amateur team. The well wishes and good reaction to 100 Thieves Next spurred a lot of orgs into thinking about that level of talent development. And if you know me, Tim, that's something I'm incredibly passionate about. It's something that I've connected to my entire career through collegiate and helping amateur teams long ago. So, the project was really exciting. I started searching around solo queue, talking to people, and Acadian actually around this time had mentioned Will to me. At the time, Will's solo queue idea was King Ghidorah. He's like 400 LP Grandmaster. And so I just talked to him. I had a call. I swear I talked to like at least 50 players over the phone during that whole Dignitas Mirage creation. And Will was one of them. And there was something about Will in terms of his character that was just so different for me. In particular, like I found him to be very refreshing from a motivation perspective. Like he's very adamant and very serious about like wanting to go to LCS, win LCS, go to Worlds and win Worlds for North America, and very adamant about his commitment to solo queue and very adamant. But basically, he has this very like stern, serious character, which is not something that you expect very much from a 16-year-old. And that really struck a chord with me that someone could be this age, could be so mature about his needs and wants, and be able to communicate it in a pretty effective way. So I think those conversations, I talked with Will on the phone and his parents for the better part of 2 to 3 months last year. Just getting to know them, getting to understand him as a person, them as a family. And his background, he's played traditional sports, things like that. So yeah, that whole experience led me to want him for the amateur team because he wasn't old enough at the time to play academy, and he still was attending high school, so wasn't able to play academy as well. I don't know if you know this, but he actually played in a tournament for Dignitas Mirage at the beginning of January.
Just a few games, right?
Just a few games. They made the semifinals, and then he decided he didn't want to play. And then fast forward, so I kept in touch with him because I really admired his character, especially at his age, and his drive and his emotion and talent. Of course, I thought watching his solo queue replays that he was immensely talented, and we did some in-houses as well where he played, and I saw the talent there as well. Fast forward, keeping in touch with everyone, fast forward to the Acadian promotion, and we had actually run a day of scrims right as the promotion happened, because we had our academy matches that week, if I recall correctly. And the promotion was after a Friday match day into a Saturday match day. So we had Saturday and Sunday practices. So the Saturday, we had actually played with Griffin.
Okay.
We had subbed Griffin in for scrims. And if I can be very frank, those scrims did not go well, and it had nothing to do with Griffin as a jungler. It was just that everyone's motivation was pretty shot from the fact that we had just found our groove with Acadian. We were just settled into a rhythm. We were understanding like how we wanted to play, and then the promotion happened, and we had to kind of start from scratch, right?
Reset.
Yeah, and so the Saturday Griffin played, and it didn't go that well. And then the Sunday we were gonna try him again, but I was talking to Will, and Will was willing to play, and so I decided. I decided to try Will, and it was like I was like, guys, I know today didn't go well with Griffin. We're gonna try this guy Will tomorrow, and everyone knew him from solo queue, and they knew he didn't really play competitive, and so they were like a little concerned. And I can say specifically they were concerned because I believe that day we were about to practice against 100 Thieves Academy, and so it was against Kenby.
Good team, yeah.
It was against Kenby, and everyone was very concerned that like, hey, you want to try this this guy Will out, that's fine, but it's going to be against Kenby. He doesn't have competitive experience. We're not sure how it's going to go. And I'm like, guys, like, he really wants to play. Trust me, he's really good. Like, I believe in him. Just believe in me. Let's try it. Everyone's like, okay, we'll try it. And then, actually, he rocked it. Like, we played those scrims. He played really well. We had a great record on the day, and everyone was like very, very happy about it. Everyone was really comfortable about it. I think it also helped that we had a big conversation about the day prior where, we kind of remotivated ourselves. I think that helped a bit as well in terms of the performance day to day. Yeah, so then that happened. I was like, okay, guys, like, what'd you think? We all talked about it. We decided, like, let's move forward with him. We'll bring him to LA. We understand he's going to be doing school. He's going to be doing remote during proving grounds. Still willing to take that chance with him because we think he could be really good. So that's kind of the whole story of it is, out of chaos came this opportunity, and he took it and ran. I mean, everyone knows who he is now, and they should, because I really do think he can be. It's not just the talent; it's also who he is as a person. Like, it truly is like someone who can be a generational talent, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, so he came in, I'm pretty sure I had him as one of the honorable mentions in Academy standouts the first week he played. Maybe he was just outside the edge of that, but like, he caught my eye from that first week. And then, a few weeks of kind of up and down, figuring himself out a little bit. But by the end of the split, I'm trying to remember for sure. I'm pretty sure I put him top 3. I think I put him number 3 in my top prospects. It might have been 4. It was him and Prismal were 3, 4. I don't remember exactly. I'm pretty sure number 3. And yeah, like, to explode on that level as a 16-year-old, with not even a full split, right, to having the disadvantage of not having as much time with scrims and settling in and all that kind of stuff is very impressive. So he's a player that I've been telling a lot of people to keep their eyes on, and he's sustaining that interest. I think, especially as you see over time, more and more he picks up some of those aspects of kind of pro or semi-pro play that are not just kind of the solo queue executional mechanical things, but how to cover the right waves at the right times, and how to be more subtle with his pathing, how to trade off between farming and managing objectives, and all that kind of stuff that just takes time and 5v5 experience. But I've been seeing that progress for sure. So we'll be very interested to see over the next little while, as technically he'd be LCS eligible for next year. I think that would be quite a jump very, very quickly. But even if he has another year, and then maybe he's looking at LCS in 2023, something like that, it's a trajectory I could see him on. What do you think would be a reasonable timeline for what might happen with him in the year to come?
I think it's totally dependent on an org's vision well, first off, okay, I think it's dependent on quite a few factors. First off, what does Academy even look like next
Yeah.
year is one of the big ones, right? Are we in a situation where Academy is scheduled in a way where someone like him who is attending high school can participate? And if not, um, what does participation and competitive look like? And then I think another one of the big factors is gonna be like, what's the team's timeline, right?
Mhm.
Like, if you're someone, I'll just throw a random org out there who looks like they're gonna be resetting CLG, right? If you're CLG, you're kind of in reset mode. Your timeline isn't super close, or maybe it is. Maybe their reset version of a reset is they're gonna splurge
Yeah.
to be relevant again, uh, or more relevant rather. Um, I I'm not gonna make those decisions, but let's say for the sake of this argument that their timeline is like we're looking at a couple of years in the future. Uh, we're not gonna splurge. We're gonna invest on a longer timeline. I see a world in which the orgs that think like that could look at him for summer, and I think
Mhm.
that's totally reasonable. Um, you look at the success case of recent additions to the LCS and their adjustment periods. I think Danny is a great example. I also think ADC is kind of like the
Yeah.
easiest role to plug and play
Well,
in a
not only
competitive setting.
plugging and playing as a bot laner, but plugging and playing with Impact and and
Exactly, with
Ignar
an
and
experienced core around you, right?
Mhm.
And jungle's a little harder. You
Yeah.
you think back to like how long it took for Iconic to grow and you know be someone who people could be happy with in the LCS. Um,
Or
you know
Spica.
the or Spica is
Yeah.
another great
Gro-
example of that,
Needed
right?
some time, right?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, if you're someone who's like, let's play the split with Will and let's watch him practice against the best this region has to offer and have him grow through that. I think is a totally reasonable uh, approach for an org to have. I also think it's not unreasonable to say that if you have an experienced core around him, kind of like what we did uh, in Proving Grounds with Soligo and Lourlo
Mhm.
and JayJ, that can guide him and help him grow on the team side and on the good habits side, that you could have a similar trajectory to someone like a Danny. So
Yeah, I think this is what makes it so fascinating to see is what kind of timeline will someone want to invest into him? Will they want to take it a little more patient? Would he play a full year of academy at Dignitas and try to promote into
it
LCS the next year?
it's
Would it
also
be
it's
something
it's
else?
also what kind of timeline does he want,
Yeah.
right? I can't fully speak to that, but I know how much of a motivated, driven person he is and how adamant he is about his wants and needs, that I could see him, definitely uh, wanting the big stage and to grow through the big stage pretty immediately. So
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I will be fascinated to find out what happens with him and how things play out. Um, let's talk a little bit about Spawn. I'd say he's the other player on your roster who is no LCS experience and there's a little bit more on the prospect end of the gradient. Uh,
100%.
he's someone who was he never quite jumped into the top of my radar, but was always kind of there as like, oh, that's interesting. Let's see how he's coming along and keep an eye on him. How did you feel about his development over the course of the season?
I think when Spawn first came in, he was a facilitator, more of that kind of role player, uh, and didn't want, or rather, like, struggled to put himself out on the forefront because his plays were pretty uh, they were game winning, but they don't stand out, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has evolved to be more of that pop off player, and I think his laning grew leaps and bounds. That's one of the things we focus on pretty heavily at Dig Academy, was just having a good lane phase. Was really important to kind of the start of the development of our players. I think him and JayJ, their laning has grown leaps and bounds from what it was at the beginning of the year, and I think Spawn's positioning, teamfight positioning, has always been like at an LCS level. The way he plays team fights is just astounding. I think I sent you a clip as well if you want to like throw it up on stream or whatever, of just an example of the reaction speed, the mechanical level in team fights. I think
I don't think my one-man production is quite equipped for that, but we'll take your word for it.
Yeah, just check it out later. But he there's three things that I think he really improved on, which I think AD carry needs to improve on. I think his laning has gone so much better, like I mentioned before. The positioning specifically in team fighting and understanding of his resources, enemy resources, and how to play the fights based on that, also really, really good. The third thing is he's now much more demanding a player than he previously was, and I think working with Will...
I was going to ask about that because, you know, knowing him from back in scouting grounds and so on, and hearing some of his comms and stuff, he's such a quiet, reserved kind of a guy, right?
Very reserved, yeah. But now, I think, you know, you start to slowly open up as you get into a settled team. He's now a much more demanding person in and out of game than he ever was, and I think that's a quality you really needed in AD carry specifically. You know, kind of in that mold of double lift where you want to be the guy, and I think he's starting to come in with that character. And I think when you come in with that character as the AD carry, I think you're going to grow leaps and bounds as you continue to work on that, right? So, and I'll say this as an example, right? I think working with Will really accelerated that from him, because, you know, Will would have these ideas that would work really well in solo queue that would end up, for example, like sacrificing the bot lane a little bit more than you ever needed to. And going into review, he would be very passionate and adamant that, like, you know, we cannot be doing this. We cannot be sacrificing the bot lane the way we are, because the resource trade that we're doing, making the play that we're making, is just bad. It's bad for the entire team. It's bad for him. And, you know, he started to fight for what he wanted, which in a team setting is incredible. When you have all 5 of your guys fighting for what they want in the game, that's just always going to be productive. You can, and you know, it's on me and other staff to facilitate that so it doesn't get toxic, but you never want to deny a situation where your players are thinking really thoroughly about these situations and fighting for what they want, and then we're coming to conclusions together about how we can balance all of those things, right? So I really appreciate that Spawn grew in that way, and I think if he continues to be that demanding player, I think the mechanics are already there. I think the laning is already there. I could easily see him be an LCS AD carry, and my understanding is that you know, he had an LCS opportunity last year. You know, little inside info, I guess, if that's not too known, but and I just see no reason why, especially in a world where, again, AD carry is so easy to plug and play, that he could potentially get another LCS opportunity, because I think he is that talented and he's growing in the right direction. So
great, yeah. We'll also very much keep an eye on him. And then, you know, we are running a little longer than I would have expected at this point here. So, not a whole lot of time to go through the three kind of more veteran players in the roster. But, I mean, Soligo, what can you say about him? He's obviously an LCS quality mid laner, and I think he showed it throughout his time on Academy, the split, right?
And in LCS, I think.
Yeah.
When Soligo first moved to Academy, rather, I think, of course, the confusion is there. Don't want to get into that, but there were very clear reasons why this was the case. I think he worked on those reasons, and he did a really good job improving and on those in and out of game aspects. And then, yeah, he just performed and got to be the person who could facilitate our other members. I think our team had a really good balance of people wanting to do something and people willing to help those people do that thing, right? And I think Soligo is definitely that latter where someone would suggest a play and he's like, oh yeah, like I'm there, like give me 5 seconds, or like I have these resources to help contribute, and he's always going to be there for that play or contributing for that play. And I think again, everyone worked on their laning. His laning got very, very good, and he and JayJ were the ones who kind of added detail to the overall macro plan. So we would have an overall plan, what side we're playing towards, what neutral objective we're playing towards, potentially what tower we're playing towards, what fight we're playing for. And those two, JayJ and Soligo, were the ones who were like, okay, this is how we're going to do it. Here's what our resources are. This is how we're going to play the fights, etc., etc. So,
to what extent,
calming voice, detailed voice for the both of them.
To what extent would you agree with the claim that that Soligo might be the biggest individual contributor to your like drive forward from a bottom end Academy team out to a top 6 finisher in Proving Grounds?
I mean, everyone contributed. I think it's unfair to say that, there were people who were non-factors in that. Like I said, everyone grew in such specific ways and such nuanced ways, right? Like even I've grown as a coach. I can't specifically say that I am the same person I am now compared to a couple months ago. Like I've learned a lot about not just the player management side of things, but also like how I think about the game and how I study the game. I've learned so much during this time being able to work with these guys, and having the LCS guys come in during Proving Grounds. I know Acadian and our LCS head coach Jimmy came in and helped with that as well. So yeah, I wouldn't pin it on any one particular person being the guy that carried us over the top. It sounds so cheesy, but like it truly was the growth of every individual person. And I don't think without any one specific person's growth that we would have done what we did. So yeah, sorry for the cheesy answer, but it's just the truth. Like you look at beginning of the year JayJ to end of the year JayJ, like the laning is different, the way he cheats wards is so different. You look at beginning of the year Lourlo, everyone thought this guy was just a tank player. End of the year, he's pulling out the Akshan, Jace, Camille, and hard carrying games, through when we play through topside, right? Like it's so everyone has changed who they are as a player in a positive way. They've expanded their game in such a way that, again, I think at their peaks and potentials, like all these guys can be LCS, if they continue on that trajectory. And it's just up to other teams to see that too. So, and if they don't, I'll be happy to take them for a spin to win a Proving Grounds. So.
Well, I think you guys, you definitely, I would call it a successful split. And like we said, my expectations from the outside going into Proving Grounds probably would have been a little lower. Yeah, I think maybe after seeing you guys at UGP, that was definitely climbing. But
Yep.
but the way it was working out, I think you
Even
guys.
after UGP, a lot of people were hesitant, right? Because they're like, oh yeah, there's some amateur teams there, who's to really say? And then, Golden Guardians and us came out of UGP and we did very well for ourselves. I mean, we beat them at UGP, but they placed a little higher this time around. I think I think those games helped us a tremendous amount. Again, just find our footing, because without those games, we wouldn't have been able to play very many games together at all. So, using those games to find ourselves was definitely very powerful. So
There were definitely some very positive aspects of the Proving Grounds format this split, especially I think some improvements compared to spring.
100%.
And as you alluded to earlier, I think we're waiting to see what the format will look like next year. There have been kind of reports that there are discussions around letting Academy go, optionally remote and things like that, and not requiring that the teams be based in LA and stuff like that. Whether that'll come to pass, whether the entire kind of calendar will shift around. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But I will say, from my part, I hope that there aren't drastic changes. I think that the way Summer Split played out was really good as a format. I think we've seen this year by far the most developing talent and excitement in terms of players who might be able to break into LCS in the future of any time since Academy was created. I'm so excited about this crop of players, and I hope that the format stays in place to allow that to continue happening. But you guys have definitely contributed to that as well, and have some players that will be very excited to see how they make their way forward over the next couple of years, and to see what you're going to continue to do as a coach, as well as you work with these players or try to discover some more, or whatever it's going to end up being, right?
I mean, I'm looking to do both simultaneously. So to me, I totally agree. I think the Proving Grounds format has unearthed a lot of the potential in not only players that we've never seen before, but players that some people might have written off, or for some reason think they're washed up at 23 or 22 or 21 or whatever, right? Like, I mean, the best example I have, of course, is Viper. His stint on Dignitas, not memorable. I still have a lot of respect for him as a player, and he showed, like, right after winning the whole tournament, doing well in this tournament, that he's still a force to be reckoned with. He's still a top laner that people should have their eyes on, even though top lane is, in my opinion, the stuffiest role in the LCS. It's the hardest to break into at the moment. I think it's really exciting that these tournaments can show that the players you think are quote unquote washed up are actually products of circumstance, or perhaps they haven't gotten the right coaching situation, or they haven't gotten the right team situation, and that all contributes to someone's performance at the end of the day. And I think you'd be remiss to write off a lot of these people. Again, I mentioned Lourlo Sam before, but he's been around for so long that it feels like he's old, but he's not. He's a very young guy, and he's worked on the carry aspect of his game, and he's a top 5 top laner under the LCS, right? If you take the placement, Proving Grounds placement into account. So I mean, you can't write off anything like that by any means. So to me, it's just it's not just about unearthing the talent that we haven't seen yet, but it's also seeing the talent that we know about in a new light, with better context, with better nuance. I think is one of the other really exciting things about this format. You see that in EU Masters too, right? Like, I mean, I look back to Maxi, who was a player I worked with at FlyQuest Academy. He was in EU Masters finals with Ninjas in Pajamas like a long time ago, and then brought to FlyQuest Academy, did very well individually there, and then now he's back in EU Masters finals with Fnatic Rising, and you see that with some of the other players, Targamas in EU, like these formats do such a good job in showing you that the talent that you saw before has changed in a good way, or changed in a way that should allow you to reconsider them, instead of the classic narrative that like once you've been in the LCS for a year or two, or the LEC for a year or two, that's it. You can't get back there. You're I hate the term, but it's like, oh, you're 22 years old, washed up. Makes no sense to me. You have so many people, so many players in other traditional sports that are double people's age and still performing, or double those ages and still performing. So, yeah, I guess that's the biggest thing for me, is not only how we unearth new talent, but how we see talent that we know about in a new light, and how they showcase the diversity in their game.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and as someone who is more than double the age of someone like Will, or some of these new guys, I appreciate that.
I'm getting there too.
Well, you'll never catch me. Well, thank you very much for joining me on the show, Invert. What's the best way for people to follow along with your work this offseason?
I started this project called Side Selection, which you can find on YouTube. I'm going to be posting weekly, hopefully, videos called in a series called NA Hopium. I kind of did a couple pilot episodes, and then Proving Grounds and UGP happened, kind of took up a lot of my time. But now I don't have those things to worry about, unfortunately. So I will be devoting myself to the YouTube channel called Side Selection. You can subscribe there. I also have the Twitter account Side Selection, and my own Twitter account, which you can see on the screen if you're listening to an audio recording. It's invert_lol. And yeah, I think those are the three major ways that you can catch me. But gonna do a Side Selection video this week. It's gonna be on or this next week it's gonna be on 100 Thieves and Mad Lions. And then that's about it. And maybe Tim, if you ever want to jump on one of those or anything like that, I have some ideas. So
yeah, we can talk about that and see what comes of it. Cool. Great. Well, again, thank you for joining on the show, and hope everyone enjoyed. And thanks to those who did listen. You can support the True Sight podcast at patreon.com/OraclesElixir. You can subscribe to the show on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, as well as anchor.fm/TrueSight. And make sure you check out the Oracle's Elixir Discord server, where we talk about League of Legends, esports, data science, a lot of other topics. And sometimes I'll share some sneak peeks of the parts of the website I'm working on, especially if you are a subscriber and have access to the hidden channels. And links for these things will be in the show notes, along with the stuff that Invert mentioned. This has been the True Sight podcast, and I'm Tim Sevenhusen. Thanks for listening.